What was your thank god I looked at the contract moment? I signed up for a gym membership on a whim and got sketched out when they initially charged me $250 instead of only the $90 for the month. I went home and legit didn't sleep because I was so mad I went through with it. I called and asked the next day to see if I could cancel, and almost everyone I spoke to said either no, it was impossible, or only if I moved to an area that didn't have the gym. I checked the contract and you could cancel within the first 2 weeks, and I was only 3 days into the contract. You bet but I cancelled so fast. The landlord agreed to let me move out a month early since he wanted to lease the apartment to someone else. We had to sign new paperwork to let me out of the original lease and to make me agree to be out by an earlier date. I knew he was a recently convicted forger, so I made sure to read what I was signing. He'd added the condition that, if anything fell through with the new tenant, that I would still be on the hook for rent after I moved out. I called him out on it, and he said, oh yeah, I just added that part to protect myself. Then he stole my deposit. I still need to take him to court for that. Freak you, John. Went to buy a new phone for $200. The employee told me they were closing soon and asked if I could come back the next day to sign the paperwork. The $200 mysteriously changed to $300 while the document was sitting in a desk overnight. Called them out on it and got it from somewhere else. My wife and I were at a car dealership buying our first car. The dealership was offering special no interest financing for recent college grads, and we were using that to finance the car. The finance guy presented us with 2 options, a 3-year payment plan and a 5-year payment plan. The whole time he made it sound like the 0 interest applied to both, and so we went for the 5-year plan to get a lower payment. The finance guy tries to get us to sign without reading the paperwork, but we weren't having that. Come to find out the longer payment plan didn't qualify for the no interest deal, and we were getting charged 6.5%, which is a hell of a lot more than 0. We got angry and threatened to walk out after we realized what they were trying to pull and got them to come down on the price. I know they've pulled that on other recent grads who don't read the paperwork and just sign. Some workplace that demanded at least 4 years of employment, or else I would have had to pay for those 4 years as you would pay for a course in case of earlier quitting. My last restaurant job had a non-competition clause in the new handbook. I pointed it out to co-workers, few signed, and it was revised in a week. Went to pick up my car from the dealership, and it said by signing the paperwork it gave them permission to lend my information to third parties. Nope. When I bought my car new 3 years ago, the finance department processed and had me sign paperwork at a certain price. Then they called me 3 days later and told me that their lender fell through and I would have to pay an additional $100 a month. I brought in the paperwork with the price I signed for and the keys. Told them they would stick to the contract or they could have their car back with the additional mileage. Apparently, this is a fairly common practice at car dealerships. Beware. I had taken some helicopter flying lessons and was considering switching careers to that. So I found a flight school and applied for a student loan. Sally me was the only one that would cover it, and when I got the final paperwork, the interest rate was higher than they told me over the phone and the total payment to them was going to be well over $200,000. So I cancelled and didn't go to flight school. At my high school, they set up Wi-Fi for us to use. However, in terms of service, it said that by signing into the network, the school had permission to search the phone and look at its contents. I did not sign in and have not to this day. Musician type person here. The label wanted to sign me. The entire contract was in very broken English. Amongst the idiocy on the contract were such gems as signing over my name, copyrights to all of my past songs, and being held accountable financially for any physical albums that didn't get sold. Buying my house. The husband signed the paperwork, and I went in later that day to sign. I started to read through the loan application. The mortgage lender said, "What are you doing? You don't have to read it. Your husband already signed it." I was like, "No, I want to make sure it is what I want." The loan was a $250,000 at 25%. Yeah right. Didn't sign it and got out of there. Mortgage guy said he was going to take me to court. I said go ahead, it would be cheaper than what he wanted me to sign. Viewed this great flat and was ready to hand over a deposit when I decided that I should read the rules they sent me once over again. I had read the one they gave me when I viewed the place, and it was a bit strict, and in general, I thought it was silly to have written rules when you're paying that much, but again, nothing I couldn't handle. Thank God, and I checked. The rules listed in the email were completely different and included gems like, if you wish to bring a guest to the house, you must put forth a request in writing at least 1 week prior and must be approved by all members of the flat. There will be no guests allowed after 10 PM. Absolutely no guests staying over. Any guest that comes over will require a $20 fee to go towards water usage for toilets. I'm like, you want me to pay over $1,000 a month for my private room and not be able to invite people to come over without jumping through ridiculous hoops? Noped out real quick. There were a few other ridiculous things, but that took the buns. We were in the process of selling our business. My wife's car was registered under business. We sat down with our lawyer to discuss what is included in the sale, equipment, supplies, etc., and we clearly told him the car is not included in the sale. Well, guess what? We received the typed up contract from our lawyer, and he had added the car along with other things. Thank God we read it and had it removed before signing it and sending it to the buyer's lawyer. Was sent a freelance contract for a job offer in the media industry. I was a graduate at the time with 2 years of experience. Was offered £6.50 hourly pay and with the expectation that I must be available to work 37.5 hours per week. I had to use my own car for business purposes, but couldn't claim expenses for fuel/mileage. And above all, the contract demanded full rights for the company to use any creative works I produced within 2 years before the start date of the position. I didn't accept the job. My husband, then fiance, was getting ready to buy a used car that's often used for street racing/rally racing. He doesn't do that, but it's a damn fun car to drive and is pretty much sure to have aftermarket modifications if it's been owned by someone who used it for racing or as a status symbol. My husband had done his research and neither of us was going to be taken for a ride, and even though this was the car we absolutely wanted, we were prepared to walk away. It was fairly low mileage. The dealer, a third-party outfit, not a brand dealership, kept swearing up and down that the car was still under manufacturer's warranty and had no aftermarket mods. I was skeptical. I knew that if the car had any aftermarket mods, the warranty would be void for that portion of the car, if not the whole thing, depending on the extent of the influence of the mods. I read every piece of paperwork they wanted my husband to sign and explained them to him, but I couldn't find anything that guaranteed that the car was still under the manufacturer's warranty. So I straight up told him to walk away from the deal unless they gave us a piece of paper that both parties signed that said exactly that. They did it. Lo and behold, the car had an aftermarket downpipe, a really nice one that had been installed improperly. It was affecting the airflow through the engine and could have eventually caused permanent damage to the engine. It was going to cost us hundreds of dollars to either have it reinstalled properly or return the engine to its original, unmodified state, which would give us warranty compliance. Yay. But, surprise, buttholes. We had a piece of paper that gave us hold on their balls. They tried to avoid us for a week or so until we left them a voicemail saying that if we didn't hear from them in 24 hours, they'd be hearing from our lawyer. And that's how we didn't pay for having the car restored to warranty specs. We even got to keep the downpipe. It's kinda spiffy. Mine wasn't really extreme, but my GF and I were shopping for houses and we were checking out a townhouse style condominium. The price was within our budget and the monthly maintenance fees were average for the area. It was an open house event hosted by a retailer, so the property's annual expenses were included in a pamphlet. I found that on top of the regular monthly maintenance fees, around $350, there was an additional expense of $800 every 6 months. I asked why there was an additional expense if there were already regular fees. She responded that the extra $1,600 per year was used to keep the fees low. I responded that the fees are average for the area and many places in the same neighborhood are already lower. Long story short, it was a nice house, but we didn't pursue it further. I'm on board with the idea of condo fees if they cover things that I would normally pay for, like heat/water, snow removal, garden care, etc., and if needed additional expenses for major upgrades like new roofs or doors/windows. But expecting 12 houses in the rowing complex to each kick in a $1,600 bonus every year without specific accountability isn't something that interests me. I went to a reasonably well advertised jewelry store to pick up an engagement ring, knowing that I wanted it to be a surprise and that she would want to pick out her own ring in due time. I made sure that the ring would be returnable for full price and even for a full refund from that store when I bought it for about $900. After the proposal, my then fiancé found a ring she liked better at a different jeweler, so I went to return the ring. When I said I wanted to return the ring, the clerk said no problem, just sign this and we'll get you sorted out. I read the small paper and it stated something very close to "I now confirm this sale to be a final sale and cannot be refunded or returned for any reason." I read it, pen in hand, looked at her and said, "Why would I sign that?" She took the slip back, got her manager, and I was able to get the full amount returned via the same way I paid, on my debit card. For those interested, it was a People's Jewelers in Vancouver. I noticed a lot of contracts have the following clause: you can cancel when your contract is up for renewal, but if you fail to do so, your contract renews for another year. I set several reminders to prevent that auto-renew thing from kicking in. US Marines. I was enlisting for a program that's 5 years of active duty, age 19. Get the contract, and it says *EIGHT years. Nobody had ever mentioned anything about that. I ask and the recruiters point out that it's an overall 8-year contract, but only 5 active, and the other 3 years I can serve in the reserves or the inactive ready reserve. They explained that IRR means you still are eligible for service on paper, but have no monthly or annual obligation, except keeping your address updated, and that all it means is, if World War III breaks out, and they're drafting guys anyway, you'll come back in at your old occupation and rank. So I signed. Note this was pre-9/11 when we had no major wars going on. 9/11 happens. I do 2 tours in Iraq while on active duty, and 6 months before my 8 years is up I get involuntarily recalled and sent to Afghanistan for 6 months. I just bought a used car and my wife and I had to bring our newborn. She hadn't pooped all day and I knew from her doing it the day earlier that a monster poop was brewing. Well, it happened in the finance office and she pooped all over me. Now just before this, we talked about the $250 cancellation option, how I didn't want it, how I sold cars in my past. We had a good conversation about it. Well, this jabroni gives my wife a digital paper to sign to reject it and zooms in to help her sign, but is really obscuring the fact he had her sign for it. After I emerged from the bathroom, covered in watered down poop, I read the whole long form and caught it. He pretended not to know what the charge was. Then he said it will take hours to manually redo. I told him to get to it. It didn't take hours. I didn't know about the signature until after I got home, because he gave me a digital copy of that on a USB drive. When I got home and looked over the digital part of the contract, I was floored to see and put together what happened. This budhat saw us struggling with our new baby and thought he could steal $250 from us to pad the back end. A lease I once had said, the landlord agrees, at the renter's expense, to blah blah, with the blah blah being a list of deep cleaning services to be completed at the end of the lease, likely many hundreds of dollars worth. First time renter here, moved out of uni to get my own place so I could take my family cat. Found a nice little apartment for cheap downtown. Intended to move in with a roommate or two to split the cost. Close friends of mine. The landlord didn't speak English very well, so although he insisted, "Oh yeah, everything good, everything okay," I wasn't sure he understood what I wanted. When he brought out the contract, it said in writing that pets were not allowed and the cost would increase for more people living there. I pointed it out to him, but he retorted to the effect of, "I use this contract for all tenants. Those rules don't apply to you." Bull. I told him I wasn't signing unless he rewrote the contract, but he refused, saying he wasn't going to waste time pandering to paranoid people. I offered to write the contract myself and was baffled that he agreed to it. So I wrote up my own contract with super lenient conditions, making sure to protect my own ass. Had a lawyer look at it and notarize it, and now I live with my cat and roommates at the original cost. When we were young, my friend signed for a pre-owned Audi and came over to my house. Said it was like 300 ish a month, and in his glove box I read the paperwork and told him, you know this says $550 a month, right? He was clueless, but thankfully it was over a weekend. So Monday morning he went back and caused a scene to give the car back without penalty. My wife and I were 3 days away from signing paperwork to buy a condo, and they sent us the latest, and we noticed that they changed the interest rate by a tiny amount, like 0.2%. They said the change was because they reran our credit, so they altered the interest to reflect our current credit rating. That left a bad taste in our mouth, so we said no thanks and walked away. The next week my company got bought out, and they moved us out of state. If we would have signed, we would have had to either immediately sell or quit my job. We bought a new RV and received a coupon for 3 free nights at a luxury RV campground park. Of course, to receive the free nights we had to sit down with salespeople trying to sell us a membership first. My ex was very gullible and gobbled up the free cookies and sales pitch after they showed us the beautiful photos of their campgrounds all over the state. There were many promises made of ocean views, clubhouses, swimming pools, etc. I was young, and he was definitely the one in charge at the time. So next thing I know, the 3 free nights turns into a full-blown membership with extremely pricey annual fees. But now we can camp anywhere anytime, right? We head out that weekend to the dedicated property for the free nights, and it's an absolute crap hole. There is no ocean view, the pool is covered in scum. The clubhouse has the smell of mismanaged senior home with 3 residents staring at us oddly. Basically, it's a gravel-lined trailer park for people who live in their RVs. I'm angry, the kids are sad, and trying to play on the rusty swing set. We bailed out that night after driving 3 hours, and the next morning he tried to cancel. They had told us we could cancel anytime. Yeah, right. After rereading the contract, this was a lifetime membership and you could not cancel it without following their exact fine print instructions of cancellation via certified mail written in the blood of your firstborn. It also had to be done within 48 hours of signing. These buttholes send people away for 3 days to a dump, so when you come back you're contracted for life like a timeshare. Lucky for us, my fit got us home within 24 hours, wrote up their ridiculous demands for cancellation, and booyard right out of there. Then they tried to not refund us despite it all, and I threatened them with litigation, so they finally did. I have a scathing Yelp review about them that gets regular votes for being useful and funny. They recently tried to get it removed and failed. Suck it, you dirty rotten leeches. I went to sign up at Snap Fitness, and it said they'd charge a $50 gym enhancement fee every year. They said it would go to equipment upgrades. I told them that's what my monthly fee should be going to. They refused to remove the fee, so I bailed and went to Anytime Fitness. They immediately proceeded to pull the same crap, plus the key fob to get in was going to cost me $70. You can buy a pack of 100 of them for like $20 on Amazon. They too refused to budge, so I backed out. Eventually, I moved to an apartment with an on-site gym, so that worked out for the better. Looked at renting a house about 7 years ago, and the homeowner had inserted some of her own clauses into the standard tenancy agreement. Now, this is absolutely fine to do, but they were purposefully put into different sections of the document. So if you read the part detailing security deposit, you wouldn't see her additions as she put them in another area on the paperwork. One clause was that no footwear of any kind can be worn inside the property. Failure to adhere to this will mean the whole property's carpeting must be professionally cleaned. Another was the waiving of the mandatory notice period before the homeowner can come by and inspect the property. There's supposed to be a minimum amount of time they must give you notice-wise before they can come over unless there is a serious property fault, leak, etc., so that they can't just turn up unannounced. She wanted that waived so she could check we were treating her property right, and if we weren't then we'd be immediately evicted. I also caught her telling a relative that she registers eviction proceedings upon the start of the tenancy so she can evict them as soon as she decides they've broken her rules. There was a mandatory waiting period between the commencement of eviction proceedings and being able to actually get enforcement officers to evict a tenant. Not sure of the current rules on this anymore, as I don't have as much to do with rental properties now. Noped out of that house really quickly and got a much bigger, cheaper house, albeit more of a death trap, a few streets away. Had a company I worked for bought by another. The handover included new contracts for all staff with the new owners. I went through every word, and glad I did, as one clause gave the new owners rights over any intellectual property I had ever had. For instance, if I had a patent from before I even worked for the previous company, I was signing away all rights to it to the new owners without any compensation. This included if they ever moved into a new area of business, so if I suddenly got successful in another field outside of work time and nothing to do with their business, they were allowed to just start a new field of endeavor and take everything from me. I'm extra glad I did check, because they later proved to be deceitful and dishonest. Kept on changing our salary payments, super contributions, accidentally forgetting to pay us, all sorts of stupid stuff. Recently, I just started a new job and the employee agreement said I wasn't eligible for overtime, but it was something I 100% confirmed I was eligible for, and it was in my job offer letter. I pointed it out on the spot and ours crossed it out and initialed it. She claimed she must have grabbed the wrong agreement by mistake. I hope there wasn't anything else in the agreement that didn't pertain to me. It did have a forced arbitration clause that I'm still unhappy about, but this job is just a stepping stone for me. Was leasing with a big apartment company where I had a garage along with my apartment. The lease contracts they cook up are 20+ pages long and naturally slanted heavily in their favor, and they use them as clubs against their tenants. Generally scummy behavior all around. They removed the restricted access gates because they were tired of maintaining them and kept advertising it anyway, etc. So the contract comes up for renewal and they of course raise the rent on both the apartment and the garage, counting on inertia to keep me there, even though they're blatantly advertising a lower rate on the same model for new leases. Now at this point, I'm planning on leaving in a year anyway to buy my house, so I swallow it and tell them to write up the contract for me to review. I sit down and read the thing and notice they've clearly left the garage fee off the contract, even though it's noted as being leased. I bite my tongue and read it over, and yes, according to the paperwork the sum total of everything was the price of just the apartment, and the total is less than what I paid the previous year. I sign it, fully expecting to hear back that they made a mistake before the property manager countersigns it. A few days later, I get my fully executed contract on my doorstep. Now the fun begins. I wait until the bill shows up on their payment website and call them up saying there seems to be some mistake. You're charging me X dollars when my lease is for Y dollars. Please correct. They tell me they'll review. A couple of days later, they call to say, oh, it's just a mistake in the paperwork. You can either pay the full amount or we can take the garage off your lease. Oh no. My contract clearly states the apartment and the garage is this price. Please correct your billing. I paid them the amount owed per the contract on the 1st. Now come the threats. Eviction. Delinquent payment. Going to affect credit. Corporate lawyers. Luckily, I have prepaid legal services through my work. I call up the lawyer they refer me to and send off the contract. He calls me back the next day and says you're absolutely right. They don't have a leg to stand on here. Get their attorney to provide you in writing what they believe their legal basis is for demanding more than what's in the contract and I'll take care of it. My favorite line in contracts like this is how they clearly state that it is the entirety of the agreement, so there's no chance of slipping in things on either side. The property manager calls me to come visit her in the office the same day and says she reviewed it with their attorney and he believes they're in the right because of generally advertised pricing or some other such nonsense. She also implied that the person who wrote the contract was in danger of losing their job because of the issue, as if she wasn't more liable for it for signing off on it. This is where I get to tell her I've also retained legal services and passed on what he said. The look on her face was priceless. She told me she'd take it back to them. End of the story. I received a very terse note dropped on my doorstep a day later saying they've removed the extra charge from my account. I'm happily living in my new house for 4 years now, but that still gives me a warm glow when I remember it. I live in a high cost of living area, so that detached 1-car garage would have cost me $1,800 for the year. Not surprisingly, nobody was fired for the contract screw up. We were getting ready to move from the US Midwest to one of the US island territories back in 2000. We had 5 cell phones that I was going to have to cancel, and I was looking at some hefty cancellation fees. Then I remembered a clause, not in the contract, but that was printed on our bill a month or 2 earlier. Previously they had not charged per minute rates for calls if they were automatically forwarded from the cell number to another number. I had mine set up to transfer to my landline. The notice had 2 important points. First, they would now charge for the duration of the call, even if it was forwarded. Second, if I didn't agree to those terms, I could terminate the contract with no penalties. Remembering that I saw that saved me almost $1,000 in termination fees. I was prepared for a hassle when I contacted them, but the termination went smoothly. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit like, get subscribed, and tell us if you have ever been in a similar situation in the comment section, and support the original writers with upvotes. Links in the description box.